Weekend is almost here. We're back on Through the Haze to talk about some big recruiting news, preview some of the weekend's biggest games, and this will actually be our last Through the Haze for the week, as now on Fridays, I'm going to have something very special coming. Do not miss that announcement. You're not going to want to miss it. But today, we need to talk about a massive win that the Texas Longhorns got on the recruiting trail at a position of huge need. We need to talk about the Oklahoma Sooners looking like they're in a great position for two defensive prospects that OU fans need to know about. And then we need to turn our attention to some of the games this weekend, including Texas A&M taking on Miami. We need to preview that one. And if time allows, we have got to talk some Alabama versus Texas, though we're aiming to try and do a live preview show of that tonight with some of the Texas guys, some of the great content creators they have, so that we can all come together and discuss that game as a group. But until we get to that point, we first have to kick this off with some recruiting. Van, thank you for hopping in here, man. As always, great to see you in here. Hope your Thursday is going well. But for the Texas Longhorns, they got a big win on the trail yesterday for four-star defensive edge, and I apologize if I mispronounce his name, Zina Umazulu. Now, Umazulu is one of the top prospects in the nation. If we look at the 24/7 Sports Composite, he comes in as a top 300 prospect nationally, regardless of position, coming in specifically as the number 230 player, the number 17 edge in the nation, and the number 41 player in the state of Texas, a state absolutely loaded with talent, and he stands 6'4", 210 pounds. This puts Texas's class as the number 17 class in the nation, but they only have 17 commits. So it's still a lot of room to go. And if you look at some of the classes in the top 10, I mean, you're talking about big classes already. So Texas has to feel like they're in a good position. When we look at the recruiting class, the biggest position of need for the Longhorns in this class was that edge position. And they already answered it by going out and getting 5-star edge Colin Simmons, who may be rated as the number 4 edge per 24/7 Sports, but I think there's a strong argument he could be the number 1 edge in the nation, right? If we look at the 24/7 Sports Composite, that's where they actually have him is the number 1 edge in the nation. 24/7 Sports rankings themselves has him at number 4. But just like that composite score shows, there's a very strong argument that he is the number 1 edge in the nation. So if you are Texas, you've got to feel good that you have a need, you are able to identify a need, and you're going out and getting wins. And this is a big reason why I've been saying this Texas staff is different than previous Texas staffs we've seen. In the past, Texas recruiting has been a collection of talent, a conglomerate of stars, but has it been impactful? My answer to that would be no, it has not been impactful at all until this current coaching staff got there. And though Texas fans are still hoping to see a 10-win season, though there were still some games last year that the fans were hoping they would have had a different result in. The one area I don't think there's any question that the Longhorns are light years better under this coaching staff than previous is the way they're recruiting. And I already know people are going to say, but they've always recruited well. You're right. But there is a major difference, truly a major difference in just getting a collection of stars as opposed to recruiting a base that makes sense. And now you're seeing that. Kyle Flood came to the Texas Longhorns, identified that a major need was that offensive line. They now have a solid offensive line. One with Kelvin Banks, someone who, if he continues to play at the level he's at, you're looking at a top 15 draft pick one day. He is that good. They were able to identify areas of that team and get in wins. A big area they needed last year was inside linebacker. They got the number 1 inside linebacker in the nation, Anthony Hill. This year, a big area of need, that edge, they got the number 1 edge in the nation. Now, I'm not saying all this to certify and stamp that Texas is 100% back. That has to be shown on the football field. And if you talk to a lot of the Texas faithful, they agree with that and they admit as much. But what I am saying is that there's a staff in Texas now that is identifying problems and going about fixing them in a manner I don't think other staffs did. And so if you are trying to hang your hat on anything as a Texas fan, that's something that I see different this Longhorn staff is doing, and it's paying off. We talked about needs in this class being the edge. Last class, it was that inside linebacker. They're getting guys that are 5-star, high-ranking blue-chip guys at that position. If we look at this class, they're trending for Kobe Black, a 5-star defensive back, very talented. And if they are able to land him, you're going to like where this class sits. The Longhorns would have loved to have been on the winning end of Dominic McKinley, but that battle was absolutely wild as it went down the stretch. At the end of the day, this is still a big win for the Horns, though I don't know how surprising it is because his older brother does play for the Longhorns, if I'm not mistaken. Still a big win. Still intrigued to see what the Texas defense is going to continue doing. Actually, I think if you look at that Texas defense this year, it is a defense that looks really good. One of the areas I'm really excited in this Texas-Alabama game is watching the two offenses try and navigate the opposing defenses, because I think each defense has to feel like there are paths to success for them. But at the end of the day, big win for the Texas Longhorns. What I love is they're identifying needs, going out and able to land those needs. That is how you can start building a base, but now it has to happen on the field. I think 10 wins is the expectation for the Longhorns this season. That's what they want to be at. Before we move into the next recruiting segment, let's hit some comments. Mark says, Longhorns, baby, it's time to wake up the sleeping giant. Oh, it's going to be an amazing game, Mark. Absolutely going to be a great game. And the fun thing about this game, Mark, is that there are logical arguments for both teams to come out victorious. Right. And that's always when a game is so much fun. When I can present a way where Bama will come out victorious and you can follow me from point A to point Z. And at the end of it, you're like, yeah, I can see that happening. But then the flip side could also be true. There's a path to victory for both teams. And I understand any given Saturday is a phrase for a reason. It can always happen. But there's a difference between it being a shot in the dark and between it being like there's legitimate ways both teams can find success. That's what makes this game the must-watch game. Neo says that oil baron money is coming in clutches. Hey, NIL is legal across the board now. Everybody's doing it, right? I mean, everybody's bidding for players. Every team in the nation is doing it. So NIL isn't something I would hang my hat on anymore when everybody across the nation is playing that same game. Thank you, Chris, as always, my man. Richard says, can't win them all, I guess, Boomer. Hey, but I think that if you're an Oklahoma fan, this does mean something, though, Richard. And we're going to get into that when we talk about the Oklahoma recruiting, right? This is a double-edged sword. Zena going to Texas, great win for Texas, but I think that means something positive for the Oklahoma Sooners. We'll get into that. Dan says the Longhorns are on the rise. Oklahoma is on the rise. As an Alabama fan, I'm here for it. Welcome to the SEC, y'all. It's going to be so much fun to watch. 100% this, Van, 100% this. The SEC got the two right brands. Let's be 100% honest here. They got two brands that moved the needle, both for SEC fans and nationally. Hats off to Greg Sankey. You see, I don't know if y'all heard Greg Sankey's interview. The man is petty with a purpose. They were asking him about the state of conferences and like, oh, well, what will the SEC do? The ACC's adding in these teams. What will the SEC do? He just looked at him and said, well, they're all adding those teams to respond to what we did. We added two teams. The Big 12 had to add how many teams? The Big 10 is adding how many? The ACC is adding how many to keep up with us adding two? Basically painting the picture, yeah, there's been some great moves across college football. We got the biggest fish. By far. We got the biggest fish. I love Sankey. He's just petty enough to keep it interesting. Just petty enough. A recruit recently said that Texas's entire pitch was nothing but money. Yeah, Neo, but there's a lot more to that story than meets the eye, right? I know what story you're talking about. There's more to that. There's more to that. Definitely more to that. But I'll put it like this. Oklahoma's playing the NIL game. They matched Missouri's offer on Winery, from what I was told. So everybody's playing the NIL game. Or if Oklahoma didn't match the Winery offer, I was told by Jay and PG and all those guys, they were within a hair of the Missouri offer. So everybody's playing NIL ball. Everybody's throwing around money. You got to have some other things to get those wins. I'm not saying that it's not a part of the pitch, Neo. I think you're right. It is a part of the pitch, but that extends to every college now. Everybody is doing bidding wars for these high school prospects. Now, it really helped Missouri whenever they have that law that allows him to capitalize the second he signs his financial aid waiver, which at this point he can sign. But, I mean, that's something that I don't know the legality of that long term. I think that'll be challenged. But we'll see. We'll see. What I'm saying, Neo, is you're not wrong. But the only reason I wouldn't hang my hat on that, like, oh, well, they just want him for money. Everybody's throwing around money now. Like, it was always happening, but now it's actually out in the opening. It was always happening. It's been a bidding war forever. That's the unfortunate reality. And I have stories for everywhere. It's been a bidding war forever. But now it's all out in the open. And so it's just all about how you can formulate the pitch. But I told you, can boast putting players in the league. Yeah, but this Texas staff is putting players in the league. I mean, if you look at the development from this staff, we cannot charge Steve Sarkisian for the sins of the father. That'd be like me charging Brent Venables for the lack of depth at Oklahoma on the defensive side. Like, I can't say, oh, well, Brent Venables isn't going to be able to do anything defensively because Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley didn't do anything defensively. I have to give Brent Venables his time to do that. And if I look at Steve Sarkisian and this staff, they just put Bijan Roschon in the league. They're about to put some offensive linemen in the league. They're going to put some defensive linemen in the league. They just put a linebacker in the league. Jalen Ford's going to the league. They're going to put guys in the Jatavian Sanders is going to the league. Xavier Worthy's going to the league. So they're going to put some guys into the league. We cannot charge Steve Sarkisian for the sins of Charlie Strong and the sins of the coaching staff before him no more than we can charge Brent Venables for the sins of Lincoln Riley. You as an Oklahoma fan, Neo, don't you hate it when people say, well, Oklahoma can't win because they don't have a defense? That was Lincoln Riley's fault. That wasn't Brent Venables' fault. We have to let Brent Venables correct the sins of the father, but he is not responsible for them. Much the same with Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns. You're not wrong. 2 staffs ago, the previous staff, but this Texas staff, they're absolutely putting people in the league, right? Absolutely. It's the same reason why I get on fans that say anything about OU's defense, Neo, when they're like, oh, well, that defense was terrible. And I'm like, yeah, it's because Brent inherited a terrible situation and a terrible defense. It's not on Brent that year one it didn't go right. That's not on him. He needs to be given time, and it requires time. They're not responsible for the sins of the father. I understand, like, development, and I have been one of the ones screaming, Neo. You're right, because I've said it. Development has got to happen at Texas. It has got to happen at Texas. But what I will say is I look across the board, and for the first time in a while, I look at players, and I'm like, Jalen Ford's going to play on Sundays. That young man's going to play on Sundays. Sweat's going to play on Sundays. Jatavian Sanders is going to play on Sundays. Worthy is going to play on Sundays. If Quinn Ewers is the quarterback they think he can be, he will be drafted. So, like, they're going to develop guys. They're going to have guys get drafted. 100%, Neo. 100%. 100%. Brent is going to come in there and fix that defense. I have full faith that Brent is going to get the Sooners right, but it's that same notion of, like, he needs to be given time. And already you can see the difference, right? I think this is a great example, Neo, because I think there's a parallel right now between the two teams. Already we're seeing, even though Oklahoma had a worse year last year than they did under Lincoln Riley, they recruited far better. Right? They recruited far better. And Lincoln recruited well. But the difference was astronomical in the way the classes were formulated. The difference in what Brent Venables was doing, I liken it to eating a meal. The previous Texas staffs, the Oklahoma staff under Lincoln Riley, they would take you to McDonald's, get you a Big Mac, some fries, and a Dr. Pepper and send you on your way. Yeah, that's a meal. That's food. But what you'll realize is that this current staff, Brent Venables, and this current staff for Texas, Steve Sarkisian, what they're doing, they're wanting to take you to that nice restaurant. Healthy food, good food for you. So that you're not eating junk. You're eating a full, healthy meal, one conducive to success. One of them is empty calories. One of them is a meal conducive to success. I think there's an interesting parallel right now. And I think, like, in fairness, Truth is a Texas fan who's always on the channel. He's even talked about it, where he's a Texas fan who will argue with Oklahoma fans that wanted Brent gone, which is a very small, not any of you guys, none of you. But there were some Oklahoma fans that I think were hitting the panic button way too prematurely. And truth, a Texas fan would be in here arguing with them, being like, no, Brent is, yeah, it wasn't a great season. He's the guy. Give him time. He's going to, it just requires time. There's an interesting parallel right there about this argument of how current coaching staffs, yes, they're charged with a rebuild, but we also have to understand the context of they're not responsible for the sins of the father, if you understand what I mean. The father being the previous coaching staff. They have to try and go about this their own way. But it is a fascinating discussion, Neo, when you talk about like these parallels in college football and the deeper nuances to all of this. College football is simple. It is. But it's also this very fascinating talking point because for a simple subject, there are so many different layers that you can kind of peel back and get into some real nuanced conversations, right? About like the intersectionality of law, culture, sports. I mean, you get into some really fascinating stuff. But we're not going to go that deep. We're just going to keep it college football. But I don't disagree with anything you've said, Neo, but I think that everything, like there's a step further we can take it. And in that aspect, I do think it's different how Texas is recruiting. And I do think it's different how Oklahoma is recruiting. And I think both are going about it the 100% right way. Look, as an SEC fan, I can tell you this right here. I can guarantee you this right here. Oklahoma would be in trouble if they were still recruiting in the manner that they were, where they were taking 15 guys in a recruiting class and then taking 5 or 6 in the transfer portal. You'd be in trouble trying to do that in the SEC. That wouldn't work. Brent's not doing that. Like I said, Brent and Steve, they're taking you to that 5-star diner that's the health food that has got the great chefs, and they're making sure you get your 4-course meal. They're going to make sure you're taken care of, that meal is conducive to success. Fascinating stuff when we break it down. But, there's a flip side to this. We've talked about the Texas recruiting, and we've talked about the parallels between Texas and Oklahoma, but let's dive into that parallel, being the Oklahoma Sooners. Because even though Zena Umazulu, and once again, I really apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name. I do believe it's Umazulu from the interviews I watched. I have it written down. I believe that's how you say it, but if I am mispronouncing that, sincerest apologies. I think I have it right, though. Very talented player, a guy that Oklahoma really wanted, and for good reason. Personally, I do think there's an argument that he's a little underrated. I think he's going to be a very good player. I think it makes complete sense where each team wants him, but understand, Oklahoma fans, that this may be a sign for a player that you need to be very excited for. Honestly, a player I think has got an argument of being one of the more underrated prospects in the nation, which is wild when you consider he's a blue chip 4-star prospect. And I think he's underrated. Danny Okoye. Now, Danny Okoye is a guy we talked about the other day, and I probably downplayed unintentionally how serious Tennessee is involved in this battle. I think conventional wisdom dictates that the top 3 is Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma in the lead with Alabama in 4th. However, with a player like Danny Okoye, when we're talking about Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, I don't know what the pitch would be from Tennessee that would supersede the pitch from the other 3 schools. Respectfully speaking, I want Tennessee to be great. I think that they are an interesting team in the SEC, and I want the SEC to be as competitive as possible top down. In order for that to happen, Tennessee with Heupel need to continue the manner they're doing things. But when I think of Tennessee under Heupel, I don't necessarily think of a defensive juggernaut. Now, I understand that's what he's going to try and fix, but it's not there yet, right? Like, I don't know that the development is a big thing for them just yet. Now, maybe a huge pitch, and it's a pitch that we've seen work several times before because it has weight, be the catalyst of change. And if the Tennessee Vols are making the moves, and if they have the coaches on defense that these guys feel like, hey, that's a guy that can be a catalyst of change, then that pitch all of a sudden means a lot. Be a catalyst of change. I wanted to talk about Tennessee because we didn't talk about them as much the other day. But the question must be asked, if you're Tennessee, is it too little too late? Because with Umazulu heading to Texas, the question I must now ask is, does this mean Danny Okoye to Oklahoma? I feel like the answer you have to feel good as yes. You saw the Fong bomb come in. Steve Wiltfong put in the prediction for Danny Okoye. And I've seen some pushback on social media for Wiltfong's predictions here from just college football fans in general over the past 2 months. And this is what I'll say. If Fong puts in a prediction, it's because he has information. If he changes it, that means the information changed. And then sometimes maybe a prospect will hit them up and say, we want this to be a complete surprise. And maybe he won't change it. Maybe for those guys, it's like, okay, we'll surprise the nation. But if he puts in a crystal ball, he's got info. He's not doing it for no reason. It might not be where the kid ends up. Fair enough. I'm not saying that the crystal ball is going to be gospel. What I'm saying is there's a reason for that prediction to be placed. Well, he placed a prediction for Danny Okoye to Oklahoma. This is a cat, guys, that I'm telling you, when he gets to the next level, Okoye could be a straight up problem for offenses. It's not me saying this as just a neutral observer. As a Bama fan, as a Tech, you ask any fan base in the nation that was involved in his recruitment, and they will all echo the same thing. It's not coming from any one fan base. It's coming from them all. You listen to the coaches he's camped for, you're going to hear a similar sentiment. The man is very talented, very gifted. And Oklahoma, if they do indeed win this battle, they're going to be getting a great one. Now, this is a battle that we don't know when he's going to commit. I've heard October. I've heard November. Don't know the date. But we do know a crystal ball has been inserted. And we do know it went in favor of the Oklahoma Sooners. We also know that teams such as Texas were in pursuit. Well, they just picked up another edge, giving them 2 edges in this class. And I'm not saying Texas would only take 2 edges. I'm not saying that it would make it an impossibility for them to take Danny Okoye, but let's all be honest here. I think it becomes much more difficult. The more blue chip players you have at one position in a recruiting class, becomes more difficult to land another blue chip player at that position. I think that's a fair assessment, right? I think we could all agree with that. If you get 2 4-star running backs, both of them top 150 players, it's going to be pretty difficult to land that third 4-star running back. And especially if these edges are playing the same outside linebacker position, right? Like if they're all playing jack, well, now you have 3 jack linebackers in a class or 2 jack linebackers in a class. And I'm not saying they are. I'm just painting the picture for all of you. I have no doubt Texas will keep after Okoye. I have no doubt Bama is going to full court press Okoye because he's that good. But Oklahoma is in the driver's seat right now. He is from Oklahoma. And if staying in the state is something that's important to him, well, Oklahoma holds the most powerful pitch. If that's something that really moves the needle for Danny Okoye, which, by the way, is a completely reasonable reason for wanting to go somewhere. 100% reasonable. They're going to hold the cards. Neo, you typed in the comments, and I'm sorry, I'm deep in thought, and I'd have to go find it, and I don't want to lose my place too much, that he visited the Arkansas State game. I saw it out the corner of my eye. You said that he visited the Arkansas. What a better game for him to visit. I understand it's Arkansas State. You don't score 73 points by not playing good football. It's week 1. It's Arkansas State. Sure. Did you execute your core principles well? That's the question from week 1. This is why a few years ago, and before anybody accuses me of, a few years ago, Oklahoma fans were not pleased with me. Some of you may remember because some of you were around the channel at that point. And it was after Oklahoma had their opener and Lincoln Riley's last year with the Sooners. And right after that opener, I got on and I was saying, hey, they won. You won, but like not all wins are created equal. And I remember there were Oklahoma fans giving me pushback saying, but we won. And I had to say, you're right. And I don't know how to describe it because at the end of the day, there is no taking away the win. At the end of the day, that is the most important thing. I completely give credence to your argument, but there is a deeper nuance to this. Did you do your core principles well? Well, that year when I saw them, that last Lincoln Riley year, I did not think they did their core principles well. They won the game, but I was like, they didn't do the core things that make them Oklahoma well. We'll fast forward to now. Fast forward to now. Oklahoma did their core principles well. That's all you can ask in week 1. And they kicked Arkansas State's teeth in. I don't care who you're playing. You need to be the one to dictate the pace of the game, and you need to be the one to dictate your core principles and how they happen. Oklahoma did that. Round of applause. I mean, there's nothing to take away from that game. Did we learn who the Sooners are? Not entirely, but we learned they're far more sure of their core principles, and they're playing cohesive football. That's a fine lesson to learn in week 1. Before we go on to talk about more games, there is another recruiting battle we need to talk about that relates to the Oklahoma Sooners, that relates to Ohio State, and that's for Nigel Smith, as he will be deciding tomorrow. Look, I haven't made it a secret for going on months now. I think Nigel Smith is going to Oklahoma, and I'd be foolish to move from that position now. We've talked about this time and time and time again. I think that he is a part of this class. Now, I will say, as every time we talk recruiting, if Ohio State is in the battle, I give credit where it's due. Larry Johnson is Himothy. When it comes to defensive line recruiting, the man has more blue chip prospects than anything I've seen. Like, it is actually insane what an elite recruiter Larry Johnson is along that defensive line. And even though Ohio State is hot on the trail of Nigel Smith, they like what they see, I don't think it's enough. I think it's too little too late. Oklahoma has got a defensive line recruiter that I hope now some of the doubters see. You just needed to give him time. You just had to give him time. Todd Bates has been a successful recruiter in college football. I'm on a show every Tuesday called The Final Whistle. It's on the Bama Standard. Highly recommend you go check it out every Tuesday night. Yeah, we're just talking Alabama, but would love to have you over there. Interestingly enough, 2 or 3 of the guys on that panel know Bates personally because Bates went to Alabama. They know him. They've hung out with him. They played with him. They love him. Glowing reviews when we got off camera the other day and they were talking about, oh yeah, no. That was a huge win, David Stone. And that's good for Bates, man. I remember they're talking to me about when they have glowing reviews of Bates. Love him. Say he's a great human being. Right? I mean, you got yourself a hell of a defensive line coach and recruiter as well, but I would be remiss as a college football podcast or whatever you want to call me to not talk about Larry Johnson if he's involved in the defensive line battle. And I know I say it every time, and I know that there are some people that are probably tired of me giving this list, but I'm always going to give this list. Why? Because I love recruiting. And Larry Johnson is as good as it gets. Let's walk through some of the Larry Johnson wins, right? Once again, I have Nigel Smith going to Oklahoma. This is us just giving credit where it's due to a veteran coach that's developed a lot of dudes and that can recruit at a high level. And I just always think it's so cool, like looking at this, because it's one thing to say it. It's another thing for us to talk about it. JT Tuimalau, number 4 player in the nation, number 2 at his position, 5-star. Jack Sawyer, number 5 in the nation, number 3 at his position. Nick Bosa, number 8 in the nation, number 1 at his position. Chase Young, number 7 in the nation. Zach Harrison, number 12 in the nation. Edric Houston, number 23 in the nation. Taryn Vincent, number 20 in the nation. Maurice Evans, number 30 in the nation. Tyreek Smith, number 34 in the nation. Jonathan Cooper, number 33 in the nation. JB Walton, number 41. Adam Brenneman, number 43. AJ Wallace, number 52. Kenyatta Jackson, number 60. Michael Hall Jr., number 53. Amari Abor, number 63. I mean, I can stop right here. And you already get the picture of, oh, wow, like that. Yeah, no, that guy can recruit. And he can. So just always have to give him his flowers. One of the most elite recruiters in the nation. Anytime he's involved with the defensive line prospect, you got to talk about it. You just have to. You got to give respect where it's due, right? But that being said, as much respect as Coach Larry Johnson is due, Oklahoma wins this battle for Nigel Smith, giving them another big defensive line win. And what did we start off talking about with recruiting, guys? What did I like that Texas did? What did I like that staff was doing? for the Longhorns. They identified needs, and what did they do? They won the battles on the recruiting trail to help the needs. That's what they're going to do. That's exactly what Brent Venables and company is doing. Identifying needs and going out there and winning the recruiting battles to help. And at the end of the day, that's all you can do when you're in a rebuild. Sure, the transfer portal now exists. We're seeing the effects of that. It can be very advantageous during rebuild portions, can be very advantageous as a Band-Aid. I don't know what it means to rebuild a team, but heck, Colorado was sure convincing against TCU, a team that wasn't the national championship Horned Frogs. I understand that. Everybody understands that that wasn't the national championship Horned Frogs. It's still a very disciplined Colorado team, right? So we'll see what the transfer portal means. But what I can say, both of these coaching staffs, they're identifying needs and they're winning the battles for them. That's all you can ask. Let's hit some comments. I got to get back to some of these. Okoye is different. Yeah. Kirk Herbstreit wears Ty Hayes pajamas. That's false. See, yeah, I'm Boomer. I need you to tell this to my wife. She somehow isn't enthused when I say it. Imagine that. Not as enthused when I say it. This is true. This is true. I saw no top 10, so you can just... They might beat OU this year, Johnny, but that's a game, man. You never know what's going to happen in that Red River rivalry. That's what makes it such a beautiful game. We also have to remember that Texas staff is further ahead in their rebuild than is the Oklahoma staff, right? Like, Brent doesn't have the same amount of time in the building than does Steve Sarkisian. And, OU had that complete collapse. I don't need to revisit it. But, all they can do is continue to recruit. And I don't see how OU won't have a top 10 class, Johnny. I think OU is going to have a top 10 class. Where they rank in the top 10, I don't know. But I think they're going to have a top 10 class. I think they will. Because I still think we're going to see some decommits. It's not flip-miss yet. And I don't know anything, but from my time of covering college football, I'm going to guarantee you this. Flip-miss is coming, and she's going to be kind or unkind, depending on who you are. Don't be the person that it's unkind to. That's all I can say. 5 stars want NIL mostly, 4 and 3 stars. No, Smash, I think that there's a complete logical conversation to have around this, right? Like, I actually think that there is a nuanced conversation around this, and I think it makes sense that a 5-star would be more inclined to look at a situation and say, I'm going to bet on myself that, like, I can still be a third-round talent and go and take a bigger NIL deal as opposed to like a 3-star who's looking at a situation and says, okay, I'm going to bet on myself by going to a Georgia, by going to one of these places where there's 5 stars ahead of me. And I'm betting on myself that I'm just going to grind against it and prevail. So I think there is a conversation to be had there. I would really be interested to see if anybody's charted data. That'd be fascinating to see. But I do think that in that aspect right there, like that's an area where I think a really interesting conversation could be had. Is there a chance OU can lure Nwaneri back? He's still been wearing... Oh, Neo, it's not over until pen hits paper. It's not over until pen hits paper for anybody. Remember, a financial aid agreement is not binding. And let me double check this. But I'm fairly certain you can sign multiple financial aid agreements. Let's see. From the Las Vegas Review. Yeah, they're opting in financial aid agreement, a relatively new concept. Get out of here, ad. That drastically favors the athlete and makes the recruiting process more difficult for coaches and universities. It's becoming more popular because, first off, guys, this article is the Review Journal, Las Vegas Review Journal. Author is Bart Davis. I'm actually going to link this in here because this is a fascinating, fascinating article. And I do not want to give the misconception that this is my work. This is an article that I would like to turn everybody's attention to, not my work. But quoting the article, it says it's becoming more popular because it doesn't box them into any one place, said UNLV Associate Athletic Director for Compliance, Eric Tolliver. And with the coaches' carousel, it at least leaves their option so that they don't have to try and get out of an NLI if the coach leaves, National Letter of Intent. What's the difference between the two, and why wouldn't an athlete want to sign a letter of intent? Simple, flexibility. The letter of intent binds the school and athlete to that agreement for 1 year, Tolliver said, and for some sports, the period during which a letter of intent can be signed is quite short. The financial aid agreement binds the athlete to absolutely nothing and can be signed at any time. That's the thing. That's the thing. The financial aid agreement, there's no binding, nothing binding to that. That's what's so curious about Missouri's law. Moms, thank you for being in here, man. Always great to see you in here. Hope you've been doing well, man. Can't wait for the game this weekend. Can't wait for the game. But there's nothing binding about a financial aid agreement. And that's what makes Missouri's NIL law so fascinating. So can he be flipped? Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I think there are very few prospects in the nation that are flip proof, right? And there are some guys that I think are probably flip proof. Some. But I mean, you're talking about a very small percentage of prospects are truly flip proof. I think a lot of the guys you can flip, right? You have a good season, they don't, open it back up. Your position group that, let's say you're after a wide receiver, right? Let's just equalize this. No teams involved. Brand X, brand Y. Brand Y has got a wide receiver commit. Fantastic. Their wide receiver room looks awful. Their quarterback play, non-existent, and it doesn't look to be getting any better in the near future. It's the reality of the situation. Team X wants Team Y's prospect. Their wide receiver room looks like it's going in a positive direction. At the very least, there's a quarterback there. That can change a lot. So yeah, 100%. Anybody can be flipped. Most anybody can be flipped. Case in point, Clemson and Duke, 40-something. 40. Well, Clemson has got some problems, Pat. Specifically on offense, they have got some problems. What's your prediction for the Bama-Texas game? So I have Bama winning that, but I don't think it's going to be a huge, huge victory for Bama just because I think that Texas defensive front is pretty darn good, right? Like, I think that Texas defense, they've got some players. Jalen Ford is a really instinctive linebacker, really instinctive player. He's a really, really good football player. Sweat, really good football player. They have some other guys that have emerged on that defensive line. I don't think this is going to be just like a blowout. I have Bama winning, but I think this is going to be a methodical game and one where you have to win all 4 quarters. And that's one of the reasons why I'm picking Alabama. It's because, yeah, we saw Texas come back from half last week, but that's been the biggest downfall of Sark, is if we look at his 3rd and 4th quarter point differentials, they win the 3rd quarter, but there is a noticeable decrease in production as it compares to the 1st and 2nd quarter. And then in the 4th quarter, they lose the point differential. They have historically, under Steve Sarkisian, lost the 4th quarter point differential. That would have to be perfect for Texas, which they have the ability to do. They do. But also, I think the biggest environment Quinn has played in a true road game is 80,000, something like that. In a true road game is 80,000. Bama seats 101,000. The Cotton Bowl, for instance, seats 90,000. Bama seats 101. Bryant Denny does. It's going to be loud. And the Cotton Bowl is loud. I'm not giving you the Cotton Bowl saying like, oh, this is going to be so much louder than the Cotton Bowl is absurdly loud because of the game, because of the implications, because of the implication. If you know, you know. That's not my contention, right? Like, that's a hostile place Quinn plays in, the Cotton Bowl, right? He's played in a hostile environment. But here's something I've seen, right? And here's one of the reasons why I am picking Bama in this game. And we'll talk about it tonight whenever we do our stream. College Football Nerds tweeted this the other day, and they Great content. The College Football Nerds makes great stuff. They said Quinn Ewers has started 5 games away from Texas, Oklahoma State, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Washington. This is his average game on the road. 20 of 30, throwing at a 66% completion percentage, 256 yards per game, 8.4 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, and 0.8 interceptions. The average pass defense he's faced on the road is 72nd. So that's the first thing. He's going to be on the road against a pass defense that's going to be a top 15 pass defense. The average one he's faced is 72nd. But there's a deeper nuance into the stat I just gave you. There's a deeper nuance because that doesn't account true road games. If we look at true road games, Quinn Ewers has played in 3 true road games. The biggest crowd he faced in a true road game apparently was 55,000 at Oklahoma State. So it'll be almost double in Bryant-Denny. That's something. Texas lost, and Ewers went for 19 of 49, 319, and 3 interceptions. So in true road games, it's been a little bit different. I think Quinn Ewers is a phenomenally talented quarterback. I think he's got great upside. But my biggest question is, who is Quinn Ewers? Because, and I've talked about this to some of the Texas content creators, and I think there are a few that agree with me. We all think Quinn has got a very high upside, but we don't know who he is because we've seen him operate in a half against Bama where he was sensational, against Oklahoma where Oklahoma didn't have a quarterback. He was really good in that game, not taking anything away from him. But if we're asking, have we seen Quinn play more quarters of great football or pedestrian football? We've seen Quinn play more quarters of pedestrian football than great football. Now, I think he has the ability to be a great quarterback. And that's to say, if he's clicking, Bama needs to watch out because he has the ability to sling it all around the yard, which is why I brought up that Bama game, because I'm not trying to have any sort of misconception here. When he played Bama, he was taking it to them. There's no argument here. We know what he can do. My only question is, you're asking me to believe a much smaller sample size than what's available. If I look at the holistic sample size, he's not the quarterback that was blitzing Bama all up and down that field. If I look at the larger sample size, even including that game, he's a sub 60% completion percentage. Now, I don't think that's where he will be this year. I think Quinn is going to have a ton of growth. I think he is an incredibly talented quarterback. I have never shied away from that. I haven't. But I also can't ignore facts, right? Like I can tell you I think he's going to be an improving player, that I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. But in that same sentence, I can't also ignore facts. I can't also ignore what I have seen. So that's something that I think Bama can take advantage of. Quinn in this offense, they're great, but he was missing some deep shots even against Rice, and some of them were drops. But there was one where he threw it 15 yards over the guy's head, another one to Worthy where it was just behind. It's something we've got to watch. Also, he got sacked 3 times. I know I've seen a lot of Texas fans rightly saying that Bama's offensive line wasn't what they thought it would be. And Bama's offensive line had an up and down game against MTSU. They're not wrong pointing that out. My only question and confusion in that is sitting there thinking, well, yeah, Rice was able to generate pressure too, though. Like, why is that only a one-sided conversation? Right? Like, Rice sacked Quinn 3 times. Kelvin Banks gave up a sack. He didn't give up a sack all last year. He gave up a sack. It wasn't like it was just coming from one position. Both offensive lines didn't have the game they wanted, but somehow only one of them is getting the talk of like, see, that's the unit. They can't improve from week 1 to week 2, but our unit can improve. Well, I don't disagree your unit can improve, but logic is consistent. We must stick to logical consistency, right? Like that's Bama's offensive line definitely needed to improve, but so did Texas's coming off of week 1. They absolutely did. And I think they'll be able to because Texas has got a fantastic offensive line. They've got a really good offensive line. They've got great wide receivers. They've got great talent on that team. That's why this is going to be such a great game, and I don't have it as a big margin for either team. I think it's going to be a close game, but I do have Alabama pulling it out for the reasons I mentioned because Quinn Ewers in true road games has been really up and down. He's never played in a true road game in an environment with over 100,000 fans. This will be the first time. I think he's very talented, but we'll find out exactly who Quinn Ewers is on Saturday. We'll find out. And look, it could either prove to everybody that he was the quarterback we saw for that sample size against Texas or against Oklahoma and against Alabama. We'll find out. But what I can tell you right now in full certainty is that defense is for real for the Texas Longhorns. That defense is for real. It's just been kind of wild to me watching some of the conversations around this game. And I see so many people saying, well, the Bama offensive line, they struggled a little bit. They didn't get the push we thought they would. And you're right. You're right. They didn't. That's something they have to clean up. But it's almost like Rice didn't get 3 sacks or didn't establish push or didn't have a play where they straight up took the center and threw him. Those happened. Both offensive lines got to clean up because both defensive lines, look, the Bama offensive line has got to clean it up because MTSU's defensive line is not Texas's defensive line. That Texas defensive front, they're legit now. They got 3 names that you really got to know. They're legit. But in that same breath, in the interest of consistency, that Rice defensive line, they don't have 5 stars littered everywhere. Bama does, which is going to make this game so must-see. I see Jason coming in here saying, LOL. Jason, if you disagree with any part of my assessment, by all means, man, hop down in the comments. We'll have a conversation about it. I think this is going to be a very close game. No doubt about it. I think this is going to be a great game. Anthony says, I do not trust the defense from Texas. Their offense is good, but the defense is suspect. See, man, I really, Anthony, I got that defense. That's a serious defense now. That's a serious, Jalen Ford. And Jason, I completely agree with you. The defense looked better, which is why, when I talk about this game, I do agree with the Texas fans I've seen on Twitter being like, hey, we feel like we can generate wins on the offensive line. The part that has confused the hell out of me, Jason, is then in that same notion being like, but they're not going to get any push on us. It's like, well, you're right that Bama's offensive line gave up some push, but you had to have then seen Rice generate push, right? There's a line. It's a logical consistency. It's how we have to operate. And that's been the one thing that I've seen where I've just been blown away on social media is this notion that only one unit has the ability to improve. No, both units for Texas and Bama have to improve because that Texas defensive line is legit and that Bama defensive line is legit. It's going to be a great game. Great game. No one. I don't think that's true. I wish I could, but I can't. I tried. Don't say I didn't try. Don't say I'm not a trier. I did. Let's hit some comments, and then we got to talk about this A&M Miami game. Bryant Denny at night is different. It definitely can get loud. Yeah, no doubt. Look, I'm not saying it's Arrowhead, but it can get loud. And like I said, I'm not saying Quinn hasn't been in a hostile environment. That Red River rivalry game is wild. Absolutely wild. But it's a little bit different whenever the split of fans is much more equitable, like it is at the Red River rivalry, as opposed to there's now 100,000, which is 10,000 more that the Cotton Bowl holds, and it's not going to be an equitable distribution of fans. Now, maybe Texas is able to silence them. Maybe. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that's not a possibility, but I also think that it is something interesting of note. I don't think that that's going to be a deciding factor. Don't get me wrong. I'm certainly not saying that crowd noise is going to win the game, but I think it is something to talk about when we've seen Quinn struggle in true road games, not neutral road games, true road games. And look, if you want to say that Jalen Milroe is still a largely unknown quarterback, I don't think that that's a wrong analysis at all. We're going to find out a lot about this Alabama offense as well. I don't think that there's questions just relegated to one side. I think largely questions can go both ways, right? Largely. But at the end of the day, I think, Jason, you and I see this 100% the same when I think that Texas defense was better than the offense. And the Bama offensive line, I 100% agree. They've got to be more sure because that Texas defensive front, they're real. They are real now. That's a really talented group, and much the same can be said on the flip side. That Texas offensive line, they're going to want to play a more sure game. God, guys, this is going to be such a fun game. Like, seriously, this is going to be amazing. And you want to know the best part about this game before we move on to A&M Miami? If it's a close game, and I truly believe it will be. I do. I believe this is going to be a close game. Both teams get to walk out of this game. There's not another offensive play caller on Bama's schedule. You can say Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's a brilliant offensive play caller, but there's a lot going on, right, in that offense. They have so many quarterbacks there. They're talented, but we kind of know what Ole Miss does. There's not, if Bama gets past Texas or vice versa, this argument goes both ways. You look at the rest of your schedule and you go, good. Like, I genuinely feel like week 2, I've had a test where I look at the rest of my schedule and I'm like, nah, I don't feel like there's any test on this schedule 2 times larger than the test we've already faced. I feel like that game got us prepared. If I'm an Alabama fan, I feel like that game got us prepared for LSU, got us prepared for A&M, got us prepared. You see what I mean? Like, you look and you're like, okay, well, as a Bama fan, you just played an offensive coordinator that arguably is the brightest offensive coordinator in the nation with an incredibly talented wide receiving core. You're now prepped for everybody. If you're Texas, you're looking at this saying, we just played a Nick Saban defense. Our defense just played Tommy Rees, who, yes, still new, still looking to prove himself, but is a creative offensive mind. He is a creative offensive mind. We'll get to see a lot more of the Tommy Rees identity. Right? So, look, great game. And both teams get to walk out of this game feeling like one of the biggest tests on their schedule they've already had. If it's a close game and both teams win out, I mean, a lot of possibilities on the table here, and I think it will help both games. Both teams, I mean. Van says, I'm worried about our defensive line. Texas will bring it. They're a good team. They're a very good team, Van. And look, yeah, the defensive line for Bama has got to bring it. The one thing I did see that gave me more encouragement from the Bama defensive line, they didn't go deep into it, but it's something I saw. The fact that Otis is at edge now, the fact that they've split him allows them to be in a situation where you have Chris Braswell, Aboigbe, Tim Keenan, Otis, Dallas Turner. That is a nasty front. And that was something, Van, I talked about. I knew you have Aboigbe at one edge. You have Otis in the interior. Who else is going to emerge? Well, Tim Keenan emerged during the fall. Exciting player. But Otis's flexibility along this defensive line is going to be something that allows it to maximize its ability. He's going to be a big catalyst for this defensive unit because that flexibility will allow for them to really min-max what they're able to do there. And they're going to have to against this Texas offensive line. In fairness to the Texas offensive line, they, I believe, are going to roll with a different right guard this time, a right guard that grades very, very well in pass protection. Very well in pass protection. In Hudson. I believe that's who I'm thinking about, Hudson. So, yes, Sam. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think they'll be bringing him in at right guard. But you know what's so crazy about this, Sam? You know what's so funny about that? That was an area, if I had to identify the one area on the offensive line for Texas that struggled the most, I thought it was right guard. If I had to identify one area on the offensive line that struggled for Bama the most, it was right guard. Both guys are guys that, if you listen to some of the fans, the Texas fans feel like Hudson should have been playing. The Bama fans feel like, and Baum said it right here, Terrence Ferguson should have been playing. So another just fascinating little tidbit, right? Where both sides, they feel like that right guard, they have a guy there. It's just going to be a great game. It's going to be a great game. Yeah, sure. Johnny, but I don't necessarily know, we don't know anything yet. Well, I can tell you we do know some things, right? I disagree with that. Clemson could win 11 in a row. They could, but did you see something from that offense, especially at the skill position, that makes you think that's a team that can beat Florida State? I don't know if I did. And if Leonard Riley is running all over them, Jordan Travis is a much better runner than is Leonard Riley. And he's got Keon Coleman, who's 6'4" and an absolute mismatch. And he's got Johnny Wilson, who's 6'7" and an absolute mismatch. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't disagree with you, Johnny. We don't know anything yet, but we know more than we knew in week 0. And some of the things we do know is that some teams have some stuff they got to fix. I don't look, if Clemson wins 11 in a row, that'd be one of the greatest turnarounds I've seen. That offense has got a good bit to work on. David, I love this comment right here. The UT-UA game will definitely be a measuring stick for both teams, at least the view right now. It will be important for Longhorn Nation if the game will be still viewed that way when it ends. No, I think it will be. I think it will be. I don't think there's any doubt, David. I think it will be. Because I have this as a close game, no matter the outcome. I think this is going to be a war. I do. I know some people disagree, and I've seen logical takes from both sides that say, hey, we're going to run away with this, from a Texas side, or a Bama fan saying, hey, we're going to run away with this. And they've given their reasoning, and I've looked at it and been like, hey, that makes sense to me. I can understand how you got to that conclusion from both sides. I err on the side of this is going to be a slugfest. I don't know. When I envision this game, I see heads clashing, teeth gnashing. No, Paxton. Please. If this happens, just bring in your second string kicker. Please do me this kindness. If Steve Sarkisian is watching this game, don't let it be Auburn. Please. I don't know if my little heart could take it. Just because his last name is Auburn. I don't know if my little heart could take it. I kid, of course, right? No doubt a joke. But, well, Lee, I thought Clemson would win. There's no doubt about it. But, I mean, there were a lot of people that did not think Clemson would win, that did think that there is a problem. And you're right. Clemson is a team that we thought we would know about. But what do we have now, Lee, that we didn't have then? I'll let you answer. We have game film. I answered for you. So we do have knowns now. Because you're right. Last week, whenever Clemson hadn't played a game, nor Duke had played a game in 2023, we did think Clemson would win. We have game film now. The what ifs, well, they're still out there because it's only week 1, but we have game film now. So some of those questions are answered. But you're not wrong, Lee. You're certainly not wrong. Like, there's still a realm of possibility out there. There's still the world in front of all of these teams. I just operate under the assumption that, like, the lack of willingness to utilize the transfer portal is rearing its head, especially on that Clemson offense. They need help. They need a lot of help. Is Mike? I think so. Let's talk about this. And Anthony, I'm so sorry. For the defense, for whose defense, Anthony? Are you talking Bama's? If we're talking Bama's. If I'm being very honest, I think it would depend on the injury status of the safety, right? The injury status of the safety. Because Jalen Key is an experienced player. Really a great addition to the transfer portal for Alabama. But if he's not there, right, I still think that you have talented safeties, but both Alabama safeties went to the NFL last year. The guy across from you, I think, is a superstar in Caleb Downs. I think that's a future superstar in college football. I think he's here now. He's that good. But he's a true freshman, going up against a brilliant offensive mind with brilliant offensive weapons, with a quarterback that, when he's on, huge. Right? When he's on, he's as good as it gets. Is he on, though? That's what we need to see. If Jalen Key isn't there, I already think they're going to test Caleb Downs because he's a true freshman. It makes sense. If Jalen Key's not there, you're going to have Christian Story, you're going to have Devontae Smith, both of which are talented players, but you want that veteran presence back there at safety. I think cornerback is an absolute strength. Because there's a situation where you could have cornerback 1 be Kool-Aid, cornerback 2 be Terry and Arnold, You could have cornerback 3 if you were in a super heavy pass protection. You could have cornerback 3 being Trey Amos, and then you could have your other DB being Malachi if he's healthy, if not Earl Little Jr. So I think the cornerbacks are good. If Jalen Key is there, I love the defensive backfield. I love the defensive backfield in its entirety. If Jalen Key is there, I think it's so good. I hope he's there. I hope he's there. Yeah. Yep. Smitty was rotating with the ones before his injury. That's why you'd either have Christian Story or Devontae Smith there. What's the status on Smitty, Bombs? Do you know? Because I haven't seen anything that like says, but I could have overlooked it. Hey, David, there's absolutely a world where this happens, right? Like if Bama has a last-minute field goal, wins the game, I can easily see this as a situation where we look at this and be like, man, those were two really, really good football teams that duked it out. Bama wins, good for them. We're going to give them their flowers. But Texas, you went toe-to-toe with a damn good football team, and you made it look good. They're a real team. I anticipate, even if it's not a last-second field goal, we exit this game looking at both teams thinking, those are pretty good football teams. Those are two pretty darn good football teams that played each other on Saturday. That's my anticipation. But let's get into this Miami game because y'all know me. I'll get us on a tangent, and we will never get there. We will never get there. Probable on Moore and Key, huge. Jalen Key will be huge. I don't think the secondary, Anthony, to answer your question, is a weakness at all. But I do also acknowledge that both starting safeties went to the NFL. One of our starting safeties is a future superstar in Caleb Downs. I think everybody would admit that. But we need the experience with the other one. We definitely need the experience with the other one. So let's talk Miami. Let's talk Texas A&M. Who do I have winning this game? I'm going to go ahead and rip the Band-Aid right off the rip. I have Texas A&M winning this football game. Guys, when was the last time you saw a Texas A&M team score 50 points? Which really, we talked about this on the SEC Connect last night, and after that, I went back and watched some of that Texas A&M game because I'd missed the majority of it. I don't know if y'all have YouTube TV, but they have that 4 split-screen game. It's an awesome view. But when we were talking about Texas A&M, because I watched that game on the quad core view, and I was watching 2 other games on top of that game, I didn't really feel comfortable enough to sit there and be like, this was my analysis from the game. Because I didn't feel like I'd watched it close enough to comfortably give analysis on it. But I went back and rewatched it. Weigman was on. The offense looked more sure of themselves. And I think that, look, we've talked about this before. This is a Texas A&M offense that if they're able to throw the football, if they're able to move the football, they have got an incredibly talented wide receiving core. Incredibly talented. Moose Muhammad, Thomas, Evan Stewart, and you have Weigman, who I still think is a very talented quarterback. He's still growing, though. You have Reuben Owens back there, very talented. You have Anaya Smith out there at wide receiver. Don't want to forget him. But the wide receiving core for A&M is very impressive. It's very unfortunate that their tight end went down. Because you want to talk about a fun offense. If they still had Daniel Green, it'd be a really fun offense to watch if Petrino is the one calling plays. When I look at Miami, one of the biggest questions I've had for Miami and for Mario Cristobal is, when will your offenses catch up? This is a question I've asked about Cristobal since Oregon. I like Cristobal. I like Cristobal a lot. He's a hell of a recruiter, hell of an offensive line coach. You just look at the offensive line they pulled in last year. I mean, they got some dudes, Okunlola, Mawanoa. I mean, they got some guys. But the Miami offenses, and for that matter, Mario Cristobal offenses, have always been odd to me. And even if we go back to him at Oregon, whenever he had, oh God, why does the quarterback's name all of a sudden escape me? I just was thinking about him. Let me go to the notes. Have his name right here. I don't know why it's just escaped my name. Got to open this up. Herbert, thank you. Goodness. Don't know why the name escaped me right then and there. When he had Justin Herbert, It was some crazy stat, like 30% of Herbert's passes were at or behind the line of scrimmage, or maybe it was with 3 yards or behind the line of scrimmage, right? So basically, their offense wasn't an offense that was stretching the field so much as it was an offense that was going east and west. Then he hired Gaddis. I think most of you have a pretty good understanding of how I like to do content, right? It's not that I like to fence sit. That's not it. I take positions, but I take positions in a manner where we wade through what I believe is the most unbiased perspective, and then we arrive at a conclusion. Now, whether I'm right or not will remain to be seen, and we'll come back if I'm wrong and learn why. But that's how I always try and do this. We wade through, I argue both for and against, and then we try and find the conclusion. Even though I take that position, I think a lot of you will know I am not a fan of the Josh Gaddis offenses. I'm not. I haven't been for a while. I wasn't at Michigan, certainly wasn't at Miami. And I think that they are right for moving on. I do. But man, Anthony, when I look at this game, man, like this was a Miami team, and I understand A&M was not great last year. A&M wasn't great last year. But A&M offensively, I think, has got a ton of talent. I really like Reuben Owens. I really like their wide receiving core. Interested to see how their offensive line continues handling pass rushes, continues opening up the holes in the run, but it's only week one. I said this earlier. I made a video talking about Colorado, Nebraska, my preview and prediction. That'll be out shortly after this. We were talking about that, and I was talking about the offensive line there. It's week one. Every offensive line in the nation's look to improve after week one, right? That's the most week one take you could probably possibly have, is our offensive line needs to improve. I swear to God, that needs to be a shirt. The most week one take ever. Offensive line needs to improve. Yeah, because you just saw something different. You didn't see those cats in practice all day for a fall. Brand new group in front of you, and you might have a brand new offensive line unit. You're gelling. That makes complete sense. But outside of that, I just think Miami is going to have trouble. If Weigman starts tossing that ball around the field, they're going to have trouble matching up with those wide receivers. They got a lot of them. They got a lot of good ones. And Reuben Owens is dangerous in the passing game. I think that's going to be a force we see in this A&M offense, is Reuben Owens in the passing game. He's more of a recruiting and he needs coordinators. I can deal with the X's. So I don't disagree with this at all, Anthony. I think that there are some coaches who are brilliant, like big picture offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator types. But I don't think that you have to be that way to be a great coach. If you are great at understanding how to hire people, at understanding some things, you can do fine. But man, I have A&M winning this game. And quite simply put, guys, it's because when I look at A&M's offense, I wonder how Miami can stop those playmakers. When I look at Miami's offense, I wonder how they can keep Van Dyke upright. They got a talented offensive line, don't get me wrong. But that A&M defensive line, they have got so many dudes on it. They have got so many former 5-stars. And a lot of them, if you watch them, they're very talented. I mean, they are very good. That defensive front is for real. Elijah Robinson's still there as the run game coordinator for the A&M defense. I'm going to pick A&M to win this game. I think Miami's going to be an improving team this year. But I just think A&M has got something to prove. And now they see an opponent in Miami where it's almost like we've been doubted all offseason. We've heard people talk about our expired offense, and it was. Let's be honest here. Even if you're an A&M fan in here, right? Even if you're an A&M fan in here, let's be very honest here. The offense was expired. Let's all operate on the same. It wasn't good. A&M won this game last year. They held Miami to field goals only. And I think that the A&M offense could be considerably better than the A&M offense we saw last year. So I'm going to pick Texas A&M in this game. I think it's going to be a fun game, but I'm going to pick Texas A&M to win the game. But they couldn't stay healthy? Maybe not, but that's where the depth comes in, Anthony. And that's where they have so many blue-chip defensive linemen, you can't shake a stick at them. They got so many of them. So you're right. If one goes down, the problem is they just roll 5 more onto the field. And then when they go down, 5 more come in. Facetiously, of course. And don't get me wrong, Anthony. I think Miami will be an improving football team. But when we look at A&M, one of the things we've got to realize is, one, the defense has never been a problem. One of the biggest enigmas with Jimbo Fisher is as follows. Texas fans, if you're in here, you'll appreciate this. Bama fans, if you're in here, you'll appreciate this. Oklahoma fans, if you're in here, you'll appreciate the logic of it, but understand it's a little bit different for the situation Brent Venables is in because of how he inherited it and because of how the team was built. But the basic logic is this. Brent Venables is a defensive-minded guy. So Oklahoma fans are sure, if given the time, that defense will get better. Steve Sarkisian is an offensive-minded guy. Texas fans are sure, given the time, given the pieces, that offense will be good. Nick Saban is a defensive guy. Bama fans are sure, given the time, given the pieces, Nick Saban's defenses will be great, right? All of those are fair assumptions. I think we can all agree there. The biggest enigma with Jimbo Fisher is he's an offensive guy. And name me the last time that offense was the best part of the team. It's been a while. More or less, that's a team that's operated on the defense, led by an offensive-minded head coach. Now, make no mistake, if you're in a situation and your defense is better than your offense, but you have an offensive-minded head coach. Let's give the Texas Longhorns, for instance. Let's pretend there's a year where their defense is ranked 5th in the nation and their offense is 11th in the nation. Nobody cares because your offense is still one of the best in the nation, right? It's a top 15 offense. That's great. And your defense is one of the best in the nation. I don't need for your calling card to always be what you're best at. What I need is for there not to be such a massive discrepancy in your calling card and the other side of the football, which is what we saw from Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. The defense has been fine. That has not been an issue at all. It's been the offense. So much so that there was such a big discrepancy in where the defense was and the offense was, which why hats off. If Jimbo Fisher is truly allowing Petrino to call the plays, good for Jimbo. Really, seriously, good for Jimbo. I'm actually happy for A&M. It had to change. It absolutely had to change. They could not keep doing the same thing. It was not working. And they changed. Hopefully it's conducive to success. But I just think Texas A&M is going to win this game because defensively, Anthony, that's never been their issue. It's been offense. And now they have someone that I think they feel good about. Let's hit some comments before we get out of here. No doubt, Anthony. Play calling across the board last week was vanilla. Right? That's part of the reason why I said, like, whenever we were talking about Texas against Rice. I don't know if y'all remember, but last Saturday we were live through the first half of that game. And so many people kept coming to me and they were like, oh, Texas is struggling. And I kept saying, guys, it's week 1. Everybody's playing vanilla. They're not struggling in the manner that I would be just like tossing in the season yet. It looks like week 1 struggles. Y'all's play calling was vanilla. Everybody's play calling was vanilla. Did you do your core principles well? Some teams did better than others. But unless you just had like an outright failing grade in core principle production, then I don't think you need to be overtly concerned. There's only a few teams that had an outright just like collapse of their core principles. I'm looking at you, Clemson. I'm sorry. And guys, I was wrong because I mean, some of you have heard me say I thought that Dabo Swinney going outside of the building and getting Garrett Riley was admission that, hey, this whole stance I have about not utilizing the transfer portal or promoting from within, that's going by the wayside and I need to do what's best. He's got to utilize the transfer portal. He's got to. Josh Pate was 100% on the money with his take about this. So that's going to be something we need to see. Lightly, before we get out of here, we talked about all those games. What about OU, SMU? No, there's a lot of Oklahoma fans in here. We'll do a 5-minute preview of that because I don't think it requires much more. Let's be very honest. SMU is a much more competent team than is Arkansas State. They will test Oklahoma in manners Arkansas State couldn't. But that's what's going to make this game so much fun. If I look at Oklahoma last week, we didn't learn much about them, except we learned that they executed their core principles as well as you could have hoped. That's all you can ask for week one, right? All you can ask for. So in that regard, they were incredibly impressive because it didn't look like they operated under any rust. I think there are a lot of teams that had a little bit of rust and they worked through it. Bama had a little rust in that second quarter. They worked through it and then turned it on. And I think that's also good, being able to experience a little bit of rust and work through it. But I also think that there is something to saying, hey, we hit the ground running. We knew what we wanted to do. We knew how we wanted to execute it, and it went exactly according to plan. You can't ask for much more than that. SMU will test Oklahoma differently. Now, do I have Oklahoma winning this game? Yes, I have Oklahoma winning this game because during 4 quarters, I just think Oklahoma is going to outdo them. Right? I think Oklahoma wins this game. I don't have Oklahoma on upset alert from this game. But I do think that this is going to be a much better game. SMU is a really real football team now. I mean, if we look at what they did, Preston Stone, 248 yards, 3 touchdowns. LJ Johnson Jr., 14 carries, 128 yards. So if you want to know, right, we'll find out how good the Oklahoma front is now as compared to last year. And I'm not saying that this SMU game will be the end-all, be-all in lessons. It won't be. But they ran the football effectively against the Louisiana Tech team that typically has got some players. I mean, I remember being at UNT my freshman year, playing Louisiana Tech. And I remember every time I would go to those football games, you just would point and be like, yeah, that's a damn good football player. That's a really good. They've always had good players. They always have. But SMU will test Oklahoma in a manner Arkansas State could not, which is good for Oklahoma. That's good for Oklahoma. In fact, it might be good for the Sooners if maybe the first quarter of this game is a slugfest. Hit you a little bit of adversity. And then overwork it. Now, at the end of the day, I think Oklahoma is going to win this game because, one, Dylan Gabriel was automatic. And I loved the connection with Andrell Anthony out the rip, especially because he's a transfer portal guy. But DG's an experienced college football quarterback. Hopefully you leverage that experience. Your running back room is solid. Tight end room, like Stogner's back. And one of your biggest question on offense from me all offseason was your wide receiver room. And remember, I'd always say it's not that I don't think there's talent in the Oklahoma wide receiver room. I just don't know who's going to take over those positions, right? Like, we just have to see it. Obviously, Farouk is there, Gavin Freeman is there, and Stoops is there. But who takes the guy outside Farouk? Because you have a lot of talented slot pieces. But who's the guy outside of Farouk? Well, Andrell Anthony showed that's him. That's him. He's very good. Very good. Odd Future, you said, what about Jordan Hudson? No doubt. Look, this is what makes this game so good, is you're going to see a running back test this Oklahoma defensive front, a defensive front they want to be better. And they're going to have a wide receiver that has the ability to generate wins on one-on-one matchups. He does, right? Like, even if you like your defensive backs, he's a crafty wide receiver. He can find himself open, as all wide receiver defensive backfield matchups go. How do you respond, right? Like, that's what I'm so interested in seeing. And Sam, I don't think you're wrong. If OU's defense is turned the corner, they will hold SMU to 20 points or less. I think that's fair. I think this is a good game. I think this is a game people are sleeping on because I think people sleep on SMU. And I'm not saying SMU's a world beater. Not my contention. But I think they're a good team. I'm really happy that they're going Power 5 again. I was hoping they would go Big 12, but I understand that you already own the media in the DFW area if you're the Big 12, so it's not necessary. But really happy that they're going to be making the move to Power 5. I think that's great for SMU. I'm certainly over the moon for them. To some comments, we'll get out of here. Lone says SMU will be a good game for 2 quarters. I'm telling you, man, in a perfect world, and I know this is going to sound odd, I know this is going to sound odd, so hear me out. In a perfect world, maybe you experience 5 to 10 minutes of this game where you start to question, man, what's the outcome going to be? Not that I'm saying you're sitting there worried, like, oh man, we're going to lose this game, but you're sitting there thinking, man, SMU is bringing it to us. If you can get that for a quarter and then watch your team work through it and then pull ahead, hey, there's something to that, right? Like we can all agree on that. It's if you go in there and blow them out, I'm not going to have any complaints because you did your job. But I also think there is something to experiencing adversity and fighting through it. SMU could give Oklahoma adversity. I think Oklahoma will fight through it. I'm not saying there's a wrong way to do this. And please don't get me wrong or clip this saying, oh, Ty Hayes said that OU needs. No. That's not what I'm saying. If OU goes out there and blows them out, that's awesome. But if you can also fight through that adversity, it's going to help you throughout your season, right? It's those moments of like, hey, we faced something difficult, and as a band of brothers came out on the other side, you'll be better for it. And SMU is a good team. They're a good team. I have Oklahoma winning, but SMU is a good team. Lewis Hinton with the elephants, my man. Coach Prime, Nick Saban commercial too. I don't know if y'all have seen the new Aflac commercial with those two. It's great. Of course, you had to have seen it because college football is now 90% commercials, 10% football. So no, there's no doubt you saw it. Yeah, David, you're 100% right. You're 100. This is a good SMU team, man, and y'all get it. But I'm not surprised when y'all get it because y'all know ball, right? Like this. That's one thing I love about this channel. I can comfortably say my viewer base, they know ball, right? Like they know ball. You're 100% right, David. This is a good SMU team, which is why I say there is a possibility where SMU could hand OU some real adversity. OU could fight through it and really, really benefit from it. You'll benefit from kicking their teeth in, don't get me wrong. But if you do find that adversity, I think you're good. I think you're good. 24 or less would make me happy on the defense. 100%, Keaton. They have multiple former OU players too. I think they have a lot of good players, guys. Like they really do. They got some guys. Appreciate the midday content. So pumped for this weekend, man. I can't wait. Bombs, I don't know if you knew, I've started basically doing a show every day, pretty much. We didn't do one yesterday, but that's because I made my Bleacher Report debut yesterday. If you want, you can go over to Bleacher Report, and they had me break down the some Alabama stuff. It was a lot of fun. Both Kamar Wheaton and LJ Johnson were highly coveted by Oklahoma in 2021 recruiting class. They're both playing at SMU right now. Man, and I hope Kamar Wheaton does well. I really do. He was a guy that was starting to impress when he came to Alabama as a true freshman and then had an injury. And that's just, I mean, so unfortunate, man. Really hope he does well. Because he's a very talented player. Very, very talented player. And I just hate whenever you see players that are super talented that through no fault of their own have opportunities taken from them. Through no action that they did wrong, by simply showing up and participating in a team practice, you get hurt, which it's the game of football, right? It's an unfortunate reality. I'm not ignorant to this. But you just hate it when you see a guy that's grinding, doing the right things, and he gets hurt, and it derails his career. And they're great people. I think the one guy y'all have heard me talk about all the time, if he could have 1,000 yards, I couldn't express to you how happy I would be. If Trey Sanders is 1,000-yard running back this year, hell, I might just throw a party and rent a venue. The kid deserves it. Unbelievable human being from everything I've been told. Like to work through what he's worked through with the attitude he did it with. A lot of people would have given up. Not him. And he went out there and scored the first points for TCU. I got chills. I seriously did. Like I'm getting chills just thinking about it because I want him to do great. And David, you're right. Kamar has that one cut and go ability. He puts his foot in the ground, changes direction, and you're not catching him. I remember watching him live and thinking to myself, like, oh my God, how? How? He made people look like they were moving in slow motion. Does OU cover the spread? No, Ween. I actually had the spreads in front of me not long ago. Let me go see if I can't find them again. Let's see. $16 and a half Van Jr. I think they could. I think they will. I think 16 and a half is if you do that, I think you feel very good. If you hold SMU to, like they said, 24, 20 points less, and you can cover the spread, you're feeling good. You're feeling very good. SMU has a unique collective that really entices young players. They truly invest in their guys. SMU is a cool brand, man. Like they just are. I want them to get back. That's why I was really hoping the Big 12 would take them. But it is what it is. I understand, like, whenever I say that, people are like, yeah, but the Big 12 already owns the DFW media market. And you're right. You're right. I still would have liked them to take it. But, that's just me being me. All right, guys, I think we're going to get out of here. We will be back. Actually, no Through the Haze tomorrow. We will probably be back covering the 11 o'clock games on Saturday. Actually, you can catch me over in the morning on High Top Sports stream. I'll be over there with him, kicking it, previewing some of the games. Going to have a lot of fun over there. You can catch me hopefully this evening. We're still ironing out times and everything to do an Alabama-Texas pregame show. That's going to be a ton of fun. I'll have all the details for that. Other than that, we got something fun coming that y'all are going to love, so be on the lookout for an announcement. But the next time you'll see me on Through the Haze will be Saturday afternoon after the 11 o'clock games coming to a close. We'll be talking about them. That Nebraska-Colorado game is must watch. Dropping the preview prediction for that in just a bit. Guys, if you love college football fanware, head over to homefield.com. Use code ATTS15. 15% off your order if you're a new customer. You win. It helps the channel out. And I truly do believe they have some of the best vintage logos in the college football fan apparel game. Love their stuff. It's one of the biggest reasons I sought them out. I tried to get a sponsorship and partner with them because I love their clothing and I thought that they make cool stuff. I sought them out. Highly recommend their stuff. And it's soft. Who doesn't love a nice soft shirt? Right? That's just what we're all after at the end of the day. Your college football team winning and a nice soft shirt. What more is there to life? Anyways, guys, y'all enjoy your Thursday. Enjoy your Fridays. We'll talk again Saturday afternoon after those 11 o'clock games. I'll either be very happy, very sad. We'll see. And as always, enjoy your time. That's it. See you. Spinning Wheel of Doom incoming.